Hello everyone, welcome back to Grace Church. We are in the second week of December. It is December 8th and we are hurtling through Advent towards the season and the day and season of Christmas. Like last week, we have some more great Advent hymns to talk about today. I spent a lot of time yammering last week about Advent and themes and light and dark. I'm sure it made a profound impression on all of you. So I won't do that again today. We'll just get on to the hymns of the day. I did promise a hymn that probably most of you, maybe almost nobody will know. I didn't know it, so I'll be interested to know. We'll talk about that in a bit. But we're going to start with a hymn that maybe you do know. In our hymn book, hymn number 65, I also told you that several of our Advent hymns were suggested by our friend Paul Twelves, because, as I said, Paul sent me a great list of Advent hymns, and nobody else did, so Paul gets lots of hymns this season. This is Prepare the Way, O Zion. The tune name Bereden väg för Herran. Now I pronounce that in the German pronunciation. It's Swedish, and I'm not good with Swedish, so if you know how to pronounce it, I hope I didn't offend you. This Advent hymn has been in regular use in the Church of Sweden for over 200 years. The hymn by Franz Michael Franzén, what a great name, is one of the great Advent hymns of the Church of Sweden. And I have to tell you, I don't know a lot about the Church of Sweden, though when I was in college, I did do a fairly major paper on Ulrich Zwingli, but can't tell you much about him now, so I'm not sure that did any good. This hymn was first published in 1812. The text is built on Isaiah 40:3-5. Remember, I talked about Isaiah being a big part of our Advent repertoire of Scripture with its themes, its prophecy and just really wonderful imagery. So this again is building on Isaiah. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. How it begins, prepare the way, O Zion. But this is from Isaiah, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Think Godspell. Who of us, was not moved by hearing that marvelous horn call and followed by that wonderful prepare ye in Godspell. It also talks about it encompasses the narrative of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem in the Gospel of Matthew. The hymn came to the U.S. via the Lutheran Service Book and Hymnal in 1958, so relatively new to the United States as these things go. The tune first appeared in Sweden in a manuscript around 1693-94 and was first published in Stockholm in 1697. And it's considered a Swedish variant of a German folk tune. The harmonization is by Otto Olsson and was done for the 1921 Swedish hymn book. Now, even though he did the harmonization, he doesn't get really any credit here in the hymnal. 1982, it says, harmonized, Choralbuch for Svenska Kirchen, 1939, but it doesn't tell you who did it, but it was Otto Olsson, now you know. David and I were talking earlier, we're both Golden Girls fans. We need Rose Nyland here to help us with the Swedish, but anyway, in the meantime, you'll just have to put up with my Swedish. It's a delightful tune. It's joyful, dancing. It sounds like the words that accompany it, and that's important for a hymn. Prepare the way, O Zion, your Christ is drawing near. Let every hill and valley a level way appear. Greet one who comes in glory, foretold in sacred story. And then there's a short refrain, O blessed is Christ that came in God's most holy name. Now, I'm not inclined to have too many rhythmic instruments in church, but this is a hymn that often we will pull out a tambourine or a hand drum and pass out to choir members and let them play as we sing it. It really adds to the rhythmic vitality of the hymn. It's interesting how many people think that they can play a tambourine or hand drum and then you find out that they can't. But it gives it a lot of vim and vigor. Again, I like this hymn to go relatively quickly, but you have to be careful because it's a little hard to sing. So here's the melody. First, just listen to this great melody. So really delightful and not hard at all. Again, if it's slowed down a bit, it's easier to sing. It loses something in my opinion there, so I tend to play a little faster and probably lose a few people along the way. The refrain. that's really one phrase. Oh, blessed is Christ that came in God's most holy name. If you do it on the quicker side, you can sing it in one breath. Oh, blessed is Christ that came in God's most holy name. Like so. So let's have a go with this. I'm sorry I didn't bring any rhythm instruments up. I could have had David play tambourine. We'd have loved that. But anyway, we'll just imagine the tambourines and the drums. Lots and lots of fun to bounce along. The only thing I might do, we'll talk later today about reharmonizations of hymns. I'm not a big fan of that. But one of the things you could do with this stylistically would be to sort of fill out the chords and play bigger chords as people sing maybe the last verse. Something like, oh, what that might look like. Let's see. And not actually having the melody doubled. So delightful, wonderful hymn for Advent 2 or 3 usually. So great to bring that to you. So happy Paul asked for that. So the next hymn we're going to do is a hymn that I didn't know before David, our own David Hines, requested it. David made a little list of hymn requests, and this was amongst those hymns. It is an Advent hymn, and it's an English hymn. I knew the composer of the hymn, but did not know the hymn itself. So David came to know this at St. Mark's in Philadelphia when they got a copy of the hymn to use for their lessons and carols, and they got it from one of the Cambridge colleges, I think Selwyn, where David had been. And it's a beautiful Advent hymn. And again, if anybody out there knows it or has heard it, please email me and tell me that. I'd just be curious. The title alone is worth the price of admission. Hark, what a sound, too divine for hearing. I'll say it again. Hark, what a sound, too divine for hearing. That just sets you up to know it's going to be a great text. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. I've got here my handy dandy BBC hymn book. It says with music. Now that's important because in many English hymnals, the small copies that would be in the pews for people would be just the text. So either one of two things, assuming people didn't read music, or more likely that they knew the hymn from just having been in church. You can't make those assumptions anymore because lots of people aren't in church, so you can't ever assume that. So it's saying here, this is not just the words, this has the music. That's why it's bigger. It could be about this size with just the text. But a very English practice is to have the music and the words separately. Now, again, I won't go into a music lesson, but we have talked about how different texts can be paired based on their rhythmic layout and poetic layout, can be paired with other tunes. You can mix and match, right? So in theory, this helps you because you're not looking at these words under this music. They're there, and that's the suggested tune, but if you want to do it with another tune, you can just look at the words, not think about this. So it's helpful in a way, but it's actually, I think in the end, actually not so helpful, because for those who do read music, like me, for example, this would be very challenging if I was looking at a new hymn, and I'm looking at the words here and trying to read the music there, but that's a very traditional English layout. So it's in several different English hymnals, Common Praise, I think, maybe the New English Hymnal, but in my antique BBC hymn book, which I was happy to. So I've copied it out of there and put it here for me, but I wanted to at least show you that. So I'll tell you a bit about it. This wonderfully English Advent hymn, unknown to most of us, as I said, certainly unknown to me. The poet, Frederick W.H. Myers, who lived from 1843 to 1901, so right the second half of the 19th century, was an interesting character for sure. He was the founder of the Society for Psychical Research. I don't think I've ever said that word before today, psychical research. very into the psyche. He was also a poet, and he wrote a really, really long poem called St. Paul. And the text of this hymn is excerpted and slightly adapted from that long poem. It's the end, basically, of the St. Paul poem. There were 5 stanzas. If you start with Hark, what a sound in the St. Paul poem, then there are 5 stanzas to the end. The hymn has 4. The tune of this is called Highwood and was composed by Sir Richard Runciman Terry. Now, in musical circles, that's a well-known name, particularly Anglican or Episcopal music circles. He lived from 1865 to 1938, so they were sort of contemporaries. He just lived much, much longer. Terry came to fame as the first master of the music at Westminster Cathedral in London, and founded what went on to become a world-famous choir. Now, that's Westminster Roman Catholic Cathedral. So if you are an Anglophile like myself, you would never confuse Westminster Abbey and Westminster Cathedral. Many people who sort of know that there are Westminsters in England and there are choirs and churches and cathedrals associated will often confuse those two. Westminster Cathedral, just as a side note, if you haven't been there, if you're in London, go see it. Not terribly far from Westminster Abbey. And it's a marvelous Byzantine building, just really an incredible building, and so different from anything else in London, certainly probably in England. And for years they've had just a marvelous choral tradition. Unfortunately, a bit of an exception in the Roman Catholic Church, but it's what rivals and surpasses, probably in cases, many of the English cathedral choirs, Anglican cathedrals. So Terry was there, Richard Runciman Terry. He wrote a number of choral pieces. He was very interested in music of the Tudor period, sort of 16th century, and so he revived in the early 17th century. That wasn't very popular at the time that he was at Westminster Cathedral, and he revived an interest in that music and started doing it with the choir and came to some fame over that. So he wrote this tune. The tune is named after a wood or hamlet on his uncle, Lord Runciman's estate at Doxford in Northumberland, some 7 miles north of Alnwick. And I'm sure now everybody's got a clear picture of where that is. I'll say it again in case you missed it and aren't quite clear where it is in England. It was on Lord Runciman's estate at Doxford in Northumberland, some 7 miles north of Alnwick. I was reading Doxford, I've not heard of. Northumberland, I thought I know where that is. And then it said some 7 miles north of Alnwick, and then I was lost again. But anyway, that's where Highwood is, and that's the tune name for this. Just a quick word about the text. Again, that opening phrase, hark, what a sound, and too divine for hearing, stirs on the earth and trembles in the air. It's all back to that whole thing we talked about last week with I look from afar, and lo, I see the power of God coming. It's all this second coming in power and glory and awe and majesty and trembling and fear and terror and joy, and it's amazing. Is it the thunder of the Lord's appearing? And this is a great line. Is it the music of his people's prayer? For those of us who like to make text a little more inclusive, it'd be very easy to say, is it the music of God's people's prayer? But is it the music of his people's prayer? Wonderful. Is it the thunder of the Lord's appearing, or is it the music of his people's prayer? Those are very different things, yet coinciding, side by side beautifully in this text. It is such a pretty melody and so English. I don't know exactly what I mean by that, but that's what my ear tells me. Maybe you'll agree. But the last stanza, yea, through life, death, through sorrow and through sinning. Hang on, it's Advent. We're getting near to Christmas. What are we singing about? Death and sorrow and sinning. It's the same thing we talked about last week. All of that stuff lives together, and it's the hope and the light and the joy brought by Christ is all made greater because it exists in spite of and alongside of all of those things. So this hymn does the same, and the ending is great. Christ is the end, for Christ was the beginning, the Alpha, the Omega. Christ the beginning, for the end is Christ. So I'm going to do something I don't do very often. I'm going to sing at you, and I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to sing you the first stanza, only because I think most people don't know this. I'll play it once, and then I'll sing the first stanza. Don't listen so much to my singing, but try to hear how the words, and of course you'll have this if you've printed it out or if you're looking at it. You'll have this graphic in front of you with the hymn and the words. I actually had to write the words of the first stanza in because it just gets too confusing to jump back and forth. So I'll play through and then sing you a verse of Hark, what a sound, and too divine for hearing. Won't be what you're saying about my voice. By Richard Runciman Terry with a text by Frederick William Henry Myers. brand new to me. And so grateful for David suggesting it and introducing it to me. Is it a tinge of Broadway, except Broadway didn't exist quite really then, but a little bit of that, but just such a beautiful melody. And you've heard me say before, my father used to say, I don't know what musicians have against a beautiful melody. So we'll take it from my dad and say that's a lovely and beautiful hymn. So to close out today, back to our good friend Paul 12's, Paul has suggested another one of my Advent faves, certainly, hymn 76 in our hymnal, On Jordan's Bank, the Baptist's Cry. And that's Baptist's apostrophe as in John the Baptist's cry, not all the Baptists that you know standing there crying out on the bank of the Jordan. So, really great hymn. We often do this at lessons and carols. This is the hymn we use in procession after we've gone all around the church, and we go to the back, to the font, and we sing this on the way back. And I have a descant that I've written that I like actually very much. Ends on a high B flat, has a couple of B flats in it. Sorry for all of you musicians out there with taste, but it's great, I think. And it's really a marvelous hymn, and people sing it really well. So I'll tell you a little bit about it, and then we'll talk about the music. This hymn was one of the most widely used Advent hymns until the hymnal 1982 came along. So pre-hymnal 1982, one of the most widely used. And the reason was because it was one of the few hymns in previous Episcopal hymnals or Anglican hymnals that focused on the ministry of John the Baptist and the baptism of our Lord. So when those things came up, the readings around that, this really was your go-to hymn because there weren't many options. There are more options now. We just sang one of them shortly ago. But still great, and I think well loved and well used. The original Latin text was written by Charles Coffin as a hymn for lauds. Lauds is one of the many daily offices in the ancient monastic tradition. During the season of Advent, it was first published in 1763, the text. And the hymn has been included in Episcopal hymnals ever since 1871. The tune, Winchester New, dates to 1690 or so and originated in Hamburg, Germany. John Wesley, our good friend John Wesley, included a version of the melody in, and I love this, why have a short title for a collection when you can have this title? A collection of tunes set to music as they are commonly sung at the foundry. So that's the title of his collection. This was published in London in 1742, and he included a version of this melody. There is also, so the tune name is Winchester New, so some of you may be saying, is there Winchester Old? Yes, there is indeed Winchester Old. In our hymnal, I believe, let's see if I can go right to it. Winchester Old, 94? Yes. While shepherds watch their flocks by night. That's Winchester Old, and this is Winchester New. So it's a great tune, and I'll play it for you, but what I wanted to say a word about is alternate harmonizations. So as I've mentioned, you have the melody of a hymn. Now, there's a harmonization. That means the rest of the parts, alto, tenor, and bass. So you can think of that as the soprano line. Here's the alto, tenor, bass. And our hymnal mostly, of course, provides harmonization. Certainly the accompaniment edition does. The Pew edition often will have just the melody for some hymns, harmony for others. But anyway, so here's the harmony provided here. This harmonization is by William Henry Monk, 19th century musician, and he harmonized that tune like so. Friends and colleagues are brilliant at reharmonizing hymns. I mean, really amazing. They can keep the melody, the soprano line, going, and then they, on their own, rewrite the alto, tenor, bass as you're, sort of in the heat of the moment. I love to improvise, but I'm not great at reharmonizing hymns, and I think it may be because I'm not a big fan of hymns being reharmonized. I often think we go too far as musicians, and we intimidate the congregation out of singing. They start hearing sort of strange and crazy harmonies underneath, and they sort of back off and quit. And that's not our job. Our job is to encourage them. Now, some people are very good at reharmonizing, and it continues to encourage and draw people in, excite them, and get them to sing even more. That, of course, is great. I'm not good at it, but because I'm willing to sort of do anything on camera, I will now reharmonize this hymn a little bit. It's going to be horrible because I just don't ever do it, and I'm not going to leave you there. I'll leave you with somebody who is brilliant at reharmonizations, and I'll give you that. But first, this would be me playing the melody and trying to reharmonize what's underneath it a little bit. Just remember what it sounded like before. So here we go. Barely did anything because I just never do it. I'm not good at it. So whatever. But you heard a few changes here and there. I almost had something effective right in the middle, but not really. So one of the harmonizations that I like, this is T. Tertius Noble's book, Free Organ Accompaniments to 100 Well-Known Hymn Tunes. Really wonderful book. T. Tertius Noble was at York Minster in England before he was brought over to St. Thomas, Fifth Avenue to found the Men and Boys Choir, and was there for many years. So here's his Winchester New, and I just love this reharmonization. It does not intimidate anybody from singing, and I wrote a descant to go with this harmonization, and it's just really wonderful. So I will share that with you here today, and you can just imagine, if you would, imagine the descant with the high B flats. It's really, I think, nice, works well. And we'll end our session today with this wonderful Winchester News. So just a word about the next couple of weeks. The 15th of December and the 22nd, we have 2 more hymn series. That will bring us to 15 episodes of Hymns from Grace. Amazing. And I'm happy to still take requests. We have some more Advent hymns listed. I'm sure some people would like to hear some Christmas hymns, which I'm happy to do either week, even though we won't be to Christmas yet. Totally happy to do that. We're going to take a little bit of a break in January, sort of Christmas week in January. But the 15th and 22nd, if you have a thought or a request, email me, send me a Facebook message, text me, however you want to reach me. It's been so much fun to do. So I'll leave you with T. Tertius Noble's reharmonization of the tune Winchester New for the text on Jordan's Bank, the Baptists